Chris Burns, and welcome to The Network. Hard talk with a matrix of newsmakers. The headlines. How tough is Europe's fight against corruption? In some countries, it's a losing battle, according to Transparency International's latest rankings. Corruption drives up prices, kills competition, and threatens democracy. So how can Europe enforce transparency at home and among the candidate states? Did the EU let some countries join too early? And should we be tougher with EU hopefuls? Bosnia-Herzegovina is tied with Benin and Mongolia in the rankings. Or could a tougher policy on corruption trigger backlash, strengthening nationalists and populists opposed to EU membership? Wired into this edition of the network here at the European Parliament in Brussels, Elena Panfilova, Vice Chair of Transparency International, Duško Lopandić, Serbian ambassador to the EU, and Ana Gomes, Portuguese socialist member of the European Parliament's Committee on Civil Liberties, Justice and Home Affairs. A question to all of you, starting with Elena. 17 EU countries, this is your study, improved in your rankings, but 3 fell back: France, Sweden, and Malta, and the rest were stuck. Italy and Romania are tied at 43. Why are so many EU countries seeming to fail in their battle against corruption? What do you think?
I believe, and we believe in Transparency International, that sometimes countries forget that to adopt good laws for transparency, accountability, anti-corruption is not enough. The real anti-corruption is day by day very hard implementation of those laws, which is not very fuzzy or is not very visual, but it is hard work. And pretty often governments, after adopting the laws and checking the boxes, forget to actually implement those laws, and that's why it seems like they are stuck.
Ambassador, Serbia did fall in the rankings. Why?
Well, I must say that the fight against corruption is one of first priorities of Serbian government. We have adopted a strategy against corruption and also action plan to show how serious we consider this. I can mention that our Prime Minister is leading the group that is fighting corruption in Serbia.
So you are taking it seriously. Ana, your country, Portugal, was stuck in the rankings, didn't get any better. Why are you seeming to fail?
This is a European problem. It's not just a national problem. I mean, lots of cases indeed show that this is a European problem. So it's quite hypocritical to talk about aspiring countries becoming members and not talking about us. In the report about corruption that the EU published last year, there were several important cases that were indeed covered up, eliminated, and I have plenty of evidence to show that indeed the Commission itself did not do what was necessary to press member states to act.
Some people call for a freeze in funding. That's already happened to a number of European countries. What about that threat? Duško, do you think that would be effective with Serbia to withhold development funding for Serbia as a way to make a stronger point against corruption?
I don't think so. As I mentioned, the government is doing everything possible to fight corruption. You need, on one side, good legislation, but also implementation. You need also a strong political will to fight corruption. And finally, you need also support in society for this. I think in Serbia, all those ingredients are combined. And I think that in the future you will see that the situation is improving.
Exactly, public support is a question. But about this freezing funding, Elena, do you think that's effective? Have you seen that being effective in forcing countries to become more cooperative on fighting corruption?
I know that everyone hates the word conditionality, right? But we should make it very clear that it's not only about proclaiming that we are doing everything possible. There should be concrete results, and I totally agree with Ana. There should be stop on this no impunity, where we know people who are actually all over the news in their own countries, but then somehow disappear and nothing is happening with that. That should be taken into account when we are considering the new member states to come. Okay,
so you're asking for a more affirmative action as far as that goes. EU hopefuls, including Serbia, Bosnia-Herzegovina, Montenegro, Turkey, fell in the corruption index. How should that weigh on the accession talks? Should we freeze talks as an ultimate way to stop corruption?
Not at all. It's about, indeed, helping their civil society uncover and expose the corruptions, to demand justice, and actually it's also to act at the heart of European corruption, which is the financial system and the tax havens inside the EU and outside the EU, because they are the black holes, indeed, washing the proceeds of corruption.
So you're saying there's a bit of a holier-than-thou problem here. Ambassador, do you think freezing talks would force more action?
No, I think on the contrary. Serbia is cooperating very much with the European Commission, for example, in this field. We are also working, negotiating so-called Chapter 23, which deals also with the issue of fighting corruption. So the accession process actually is supporting this process.
Okay. Is there the possibility that if we're too tough on fighting corruption in certain countries, that there could be backlash by nationalists, by populists saying, hey, they're telling us too much of what we should be doing at home? Elena, I mean, and you're based in Russia.
Yes.
How much of a danger is there in a backlash against fighting corruption?
Oh, that is all absolutely empty talks, because a real patriot of the country knows that we need real anti-corruption institution, real transparency, real accountability, real freedom of civil society. Everything the rest doesn't matter. So all these talks is just for political slogans. So I wouldn't pay too much attention to that.
Anna, what do you think?
I agree. And the EU should not, again, be hypocritical, because, indeed, much of the proceeds of the corruption in Russia or in other places actually are washed through the EU financial system and invested in EU property, and that cannot continue to be overlooked by the EU
I believe when
governments.
Okay, but when we've seen accession talks get tough on certain issues, has that not encouraged or helped actually some populists and nationalists in Serbia, or not? What do you think?
Well, the problem of conditionality is the one that we can discuss about. But I think that there is large agreement in Serbia that corruption is a bad thing, and it should be fought from every angle. So
there is public support for that?
Yes, I think so. Very much.
Final question. There's an interesting campaign called Unmask the Corrupt. That is Transparency International's campaign. It urges the EU, the US, and the G20 countries to do like Denmark and create a public registers showing who really owns what company, who's behind these companies. How effective would that be? Or do you think maybe that might just encourage companies to go elsewhere? Anna?
No, I mean, this is central, and that's exactly what we are trying to achieve here in the EP now, negotiating the new anti-money laundering directive and wanting it to be inserted in that directive. And actually, it's some European countries, namely associated with tax havens, who are actually trying to stop us and to prevent it. This is absolutely critical to unmask the corrupt, absolutely, and to preclude and to prevent this system of shell companies that hide the corrupt.
Elena, I mean, couldn't this encourage companies just to go to places where they're not regulated?
Oh, come on. I mean, the nature of corruption is to enjoy life on proceeds of corruption. And if Europe and all other places where corrupt officials like to do shopping or live or to buy villas will stop accepting that money and create the public registers of beneficiary ownership under this Unmask the Corrupt campaign, then they cannot go elsewhere, because it's very difficult to enjoy life elsewhere in the dark corners. There is no point to be corrupt if you cannot do that.
Ambassador, is your country ready to sign a register like that?
Well, I think we should look to this, but I think it is one of the elements of the general fight against corruption. I think that we should not talk only about this part of, let's call it business corruption, but also on different other very difficult issues like corruption in the health sector or in education, etc.
More specific.
Corruption is very widespread.
Thanks, Ambassador. I'm so sorry we're out of time. I'd like to thank our guests, Elena Panfilova, Dusko Lopandic, and Anna Gomez. I'm Chris Burns, and until next time, thanks for connecting with The Network.